This is a story about sailing in the sea. But more importantly, it's a story about making choices. Choices between wariness and complacency. Choices between intuition and ignorance. Choices between doing the right thing and succumbing to greed. It's a story that happened long ago, but it's also a story that is in each of us. Every time we step aboard, our story is dictated by these choices. Hi all, this is Captain Tom here. I've been a United States Coast Guard 100-ton MMC, that's the Master Mariner Certificate, for many years. I've skippered or been aboard boats or crewed for boats, from dinghies to vessels with up to 150 passengers, on inland lakes, the Mississippi River, coastal waters, and many of the world's oceans. Most of this has been via the good old-fashioned way, under sail. My roles have been as a commercial and recreational skipper, sailing instructor, bareboat charter instructor, charter master, 12-volt electrician, mechanic, rigger, void provisioner, glorious marine head plumber, and pretty much anything that keeps boats afloat and moving. Over the many decades, I'm proud to say that I've been involved with introducing many to the sport of sailing, cruising, and yacht racing. I love to hear the stories about their journeys and adventures. This is my fulfillment. My interest in this video and the channel in general is to share some of my experiences with what I've learned and dealt with over the years, and to especially make those who are new to the sport enjoy it in the long run as much as I have. If this video adds one more new sailor to this world, or prevents one less radio distress call or tragic outcome that otherwise could have been, then it has served its purpose. Mark Twain once said, "Good judgment is the result of experience, and experience is the result of bad judgment." I hope that what I say in this video gives you a little morsel of that good judgment by proxy from others. The wise learn from others as much as possible. I don't think it's a controversial statement to say that the most famous maritime disaster in history is that of the Titanic. Most of us are familiar with the movies that have depicted it, and are aware of the basic details and the scale of the tragedy. As a child, I even remember singing a song with everyone on my school bus about the great ship Titanic. It's pervasive in our culture. But I also think it's a good example to illustrate the warnings and lessons that all of us should learn from. But because this event has been shrouded with Hollywood sensationalism and the passage of time, sometimes it can be harder to be objective about what caused the cascade of mistakes in the first place, especially when considering that other ships in the vicinity at the time passed through unscathed. It was not just the icebergs by themselves. And thank goodness for that, because my grandfather was aboard one of those ships in those same waters on his way to Ellis Island. So why is that, and what did cause it? The point I'm trying to make is that the tragedy of the Titanic was determined by the choices that were made. Choices that could have been made differently. And some choices that were made even long before the Titanic set sail. My suggestion in this video is that there were 3 fatal errors that the designer, builders, owners, and crew and skipper of the Titanic made that culminated in this disaster. But more relevant to us is that these fatal errors serve as a warning, too often unheeded, for all of us venturing from shore regardless of the size of the vessel or body of water, and the risks have not changed since that fateful day. While some of the causes I mention are speculative, the end result and the lessons we should learn are not. When I mean lesson here, I infer that it is a warning that has been heeded. A warning that has not been heeded is no lesson at all. If you hang on to the end of the video, you'll see that the last lesson is by far the most important one, and should always be in the back of the mind of the skipper. I believe that being the skipper of a vessel, even if you're alone on the boat, is far more than just being in charge. It is also our agreeing to a contract with the vessel, your crew, and Mother Nature. The skipper's obligations in this contract include accounting for and abiding by the lessons that we'll describe, and thus hopefully providing a safe passage for all. Okay, so if you're bored with this, let's get started. Lesson number 1. Mother Nature will always find your weaknesses. When I refer to Mother Nature, I refer not only to the weather and sea state, but to any natural process that puts you, your crew, or your vessel at risk. I'll explain. As a captain, I personally categorize these into 2 areas of hard weaknesses and soft weaknesses. Hard weaknesses I consider to be weaknesses in the vessel or its physical preparation or condition. Some examples from the Titanic. And number 1, a bulkhead system that was not designed to keep the ship afloat with the probable damage from an iceberg impact. Keep in mind that the iceberg-strewn North Atlantic was the Titanic's habitat. 2, the rudder was too small and didn't allow for adequate collision avoidance at the Titanic's passage-making speeds. Number 3, reduced visibility and with no radar. Now, radar had not been invented yet, so how can we say this is a weakness? But I would say certainly if they had had it, the collision could have been avoided. But you know, Mother Nature doesn't really care if something is invented yet or not, so I still consider it a weakness. 4, inadequate lifeboats for even just the passengers. 5, the inability to deploy some of the lifeboats when the Titanic was sinking. And the list certainly goes on from here. Examples of the soft weaknesses are a little more subjective but are just as critical. Number 1, the owners of the Titanic were pushing the captain to go faster than prudent in an iceberg field to set a transatlantic speed record for their marketing purposes. The weakness was that the priorities were wrong. Number 2, the captain felt pressure to go beyond what he considered to be safe speed for the iceberg field, thus forcing him to take sides for something that could happen, as in hit an iceberg, versus something that would happen, as that he would lose his job. This is a weakness. Number 3, when the Titanic spotted the iceberg, the instinctive but fatal error was given to change course with the tiny rudder, which caused the ship to glance off the iceberg and peel the hull open like a can opener. It actually had no hope of actually missing the iceberg, but many experts agree that it would have been much better if the ship had not tried to change course, which then would have caused the Titanic to hit the iceberg square on, with fewer of the watertight compartments being damaged. The weakness is that the situation was not studied well enough ahead of time, nor knowledge given to the helm to do this. A weakness in competence. The list, of course, can go on here as well. So let's shift gears to our own commands. Some examples of hard weaknesses are, and I emphasize some because this is just a start, it is different for every vessel and circumstance. Number 1, galvanic or electrolytic corrosion, especially with through hulls and seacocks. Number 2, metal fatigue, especially load-bearing elements like clevis pins and standing rigging. Number 3, inherent design flaws on the boat, undersized rudder posts, etc. Number 4, anything amiss with the engine, especially if it's due to being lazy with preventive maintenance. 5, a poorly designed or troublesome electrical system. 6, the crew or yourself not having the right clothing. This happens a lot and can be extremely serious even in temperate waters. Number 7, bilge pumps not working or with clogged filters. Oh yes, and this is just the beginning, by the way. Some examples of soft weaknesses, potentially just as deadly. Inadequate knowledge of the weather, tides and navigation, and often a false confidence to go with that. Indecisiveness or lack of judgment on the part of the skipper or crew, allowing situations to get from bad to worse rather than pulling the plug. Inaction is this weakness. Number 3, inadequate knowledge or judgment of what to do in various crisis situations, such as a lack of visibility in a crowded sea lane, dismasting, taking on water quickly, and so forth. Panic is the weakness here. 4, trying to sail to a calendar schedule, not to the weather situation, as in ignoring the weather, with excuses like, "We got to get going, we got to be there in 4 days," or "We're burning up all of our cash sitting here in the marina." Here the weakness is compulsion. Number 5, inadequate sleep and excessive fatigue, especially in cold water and high seas. Compromised physical ability is a weakness. Number 6, ignoring or rationalizing over some critical system or part of the vessel. Complacency is a weakness. The list goes on here too. My mantra for living this lesson is, better is an honest doubt than a foolish certainty. Know your vessel, weather, crew, and especially yourself. No detail is too small. Mother Nature will find your weaknesses, especially if you know about them and ignore them. In retrospect, it will seem as if she knows where you have cut your corners. Lesson number 2, expect the unexpected. The hard truth is, even if you have planned everything and mitigated every known weakness you're aware of, other unexpected things will happen. So let's look at the Titanic again. Did the builders of the Titanic really expect to use the inadequate number of lifeboats? Or expect the bulkheads to actually have to keep the ship afloat after a collision? What do you think? Number 2, when the builders of the Titanic put in gates in portions of the ship to separate passengers by the class of their ticket, did they really think that it would trap them during the sinking? What do you think? Number 3, did the captain really expect to collide with an iceberg, or did he really value his job greater? We'll never really know, but I believe because of the pressure he was put under to keep a schedule, he made decisions under duress that he wouldn't have otherwise. So now let's apply this to our own commands. Do we ever really expect to dismast or unexpectedly take on water? Based on what I see equipment and mentality-wise on many boats, I think not. Number 2, when we do a crew overboard drill in calm waters, do we really expect to have to do it for real at night in big seas? I would argue that many of us go through the motions in practice, but don't really expect to have to do this in these conditions. One way to think about expecting the unexpected is to think about a bird that comes to your boat that you have put a gift of food out on the deck. When they approach the food, they first look from afar to see that they themselves won't become the prey. Even as they are eating the prize, they are constantly aware of their surroundings and are ready to take flight in survival mode if needed. Expecting the unexpected is a way of thinking by choice. It is a way of having a sort of animal cunning to stay alive. It's best to be like the bird. The last lesson is not really a lesson at all, but a fact. A fact that can guide your choices if you choose to listen to it. And that is, Mother Nature is always in control and will always win. From the perspective of the Titanic was steaming faster than her rudder could turn the ship for the circumstances. The momentum of the iceberg collision opened up the hull. Number 2, the Titanic lost positive buoyancy and it sank. Number 3, the bitterly cold water of the North Atlantic ensured that every person from the Titanic that did not get on a lifeboat did not survive. And when you think about it, did the skipper and crew think that they could somehow cheat Mother Nature? Now we know the ultimate answer to that question. They lost that contest. Let's bring this into perspective of our own commands. Number 1, it's a fact. If we run aground hard enough, we will compromise our hull and sink. Number 2, if the storm is strong enough and we're careless enough, we will lose our rig. Number 3, if we go under a bridge with inadequate air draft at the time we go under it, we will hit it and probably lose our mast. It seems so simple, but yet our choice of arrogance or ignorance often does us in. I use the word arrogance here as the opposite of submissive. Mother Nature does not forgive for either of these two vices. There should never be any doubt as to who is really in control. I consider it as a sort of humility that every skipper must have as soon as they step aboard. As a skipper, you may be in charge of things, but in reality, Mother Nature is always in control. There is no vessel built perfectly enough, nor technology clever enough, and I'm thinking here of radar, since the Titanic didn't have it and we generally do, nor crew strong or knowledgeable enough to completely overcome Mother Nature. But I believe that just knowing this lesson makes a difference. Would the Titanic disaster have been made differently if the builders, owners, captain, and crew had this same humility? We'll never know for sure, but we do know their story. What do you think? The only additional thing that I'd add is that there are other maritime disasters that had every advantage going for them. Cracked crews, radar, depth sounders, GPS, but where the lack of humility was their ultimate doom. Now I get that these are very broad lessons, but I would argue that they are front and center to us every day. The good news is that we have the ability to make the right choices, if we listen. And why do I say new skippers at the beginning of this video? Because if you've been a skipper long enough, you've discovered these lessons already. In our next video, we'll talk about the best way to see at night using the unique nature of the human eye that's even mentioned in the text of the ancient Greek mariners. When you try it, you'll be amazed. So if you like what you've seen, please subscribe and like. Until then, may you have fair winds and dry bilges.